Crystal Tower information, Whiskey 2153 Zulu, wind 060 at 5.
076 Mike Juliet, this is departure radar contact.
Hazardous weather information from Minnesota available on flight service frequency.
You've dialed in the Flying Midwest podcast, connecting aviators from across America's heartland, sharing news, information, and events from around the region.
Calling Nancy 53 on Overtime Roger, turn left heading 070, runway 9er, clear for takeoff.
Sit back, relax, and join our crew for some hangar talk as we discuss a wide variety of regional aviation topics.
Archer 71143, flying flag, runway 28 left, quick takeoff, left hand southbound.
And now, from our home at the Anoka County Blaine Airport, our checklist is complete, and we're ready for departure for another episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Contact departure, every flight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Flying Midwest podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jim, joined by my two fabulous co-hosts, Maddie.
Hello.
And the one and only Badger Pilot.
Hello.
How we doing?
We're good.
Good.
Doing okay. I have to do my taxes, so
What?
I will be better. What do you mean? What?
You should have done that already.
Isn't it due like now?
I have 3 days.
Oh, my goodness. Remember earlier before we started like the actual episode recording where I gave you a look and you said that's like a look a parent would give you? Assume that I'm going to give you that look now.
Oh, no, I expect it.
You totally should have done that by now. There.
Oh, no, I'm fully aware. It's just, yeah, my finances are a disaster. And I need help.
Scolding complete.
Yeah. End of checklist.
Yeah. Badger, I
I
think
have
that you
done
should...
my taxes already. Thank you for asking.
That's not what I did mine long ago.
In fact, I got my refund back, and unfortunately, it is not quite enough to buy avionics for the plane.
Darn.
Well,
You
I
guys
didn't
got a
think it would be-
refund?
That stuff's
No.
expensive.
I sure
Oh.
didn't. Badger, you want to talk to us a little bit about what's coming up on this episode? Because I think it's going to be exciting.
I think so, too. We actually have a very special guest this episode, somebody who all of our listeners should know quite well. She has become an expert in all things Checkride, type ratings, and even more fancy certifications that include initials. So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss out on it.
Super secret guest.
Yes.
I'm so excited. I'm interested to see who it is.
Me too. Aviation-wise, what have we been up to?
I've been in the sim some. Been flying a little bit. Not really. The weather here has been kind of gross.
That happens.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have been flying a decent amount since we last talked. I safety pilot for a couple of people, so got to sit in some planes that I don't often get to sit in. I went out and taught myself the commercial maneuvers since
What could go wrong with
Right,
that?
exactly. 'Cause-
Privacy, never heard of it.
Right. Well, the weather keeps canceling my lesson, so I haven't had a commercial lesson yet. So I just binge watched a bunch of YouTube videos and went out and tried to. And I made a private video. It's available to my patrons only, but I sent it to my instructor too. Like, tear this apart. Tell me what you think. He's like,
I think you shouldn't have done that yet.
no, no. He said we're pretty much ready to start honing it in, and like it's all looking good. So I feel good about that. And then the biggest thing I did last week, I took both of my parents on a flight to dinner, which
Nice.
was really cool. I'd flown them both individually in my dad in one of the club planes when I was in the club, and my mom in a rental. But to have them both in my plane, flying them to dinner, and then we did the Milwaukee Skyline tour at night.
Oh, cool.
And so, like, seeing their reactions of like, oh, we've hiked along that trail in that park, and we've been to that beach, and then seeing downtown at night, it was really special for me to have them there, and they really seemed to enjoy it. So that was cool.
Very cool.
I've yet to do that with my parents. Someday. I'll have to buy an airplane.
Or rent one.
Or steal one.
Take them up in the beach jet.
In the sim, I actually did that after my ATP ride. They came and visited after I finished.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the instructors let me set up the sim at JFK, and I did a single pilot visual pattern a la Cessna in the beach jet. It was awesome. Honestly, landed on 1,000 footers.
Nice.
Nailed it. Nailed my speeds. It
Very
was
cool.
fabulous.
Fun.
It was.
Jim, I know your engine's still down, but are you
Yep,
flying
sure
in the
is.
club?
Oh.
No. Since our last episode, I've been working on the website a lot. For this here podcast, et cetera. So it takes up a lot of time. I was in the hangar on Wednesday night, though. I sat in there for a while
There you
Just-
go.
and listened to airplanes.
You know what? That sounds like a good time, honestly.
Yeah.
And it was that night was decent, but the club planes were booked. So I sat in the hangar. I opened the door for a little bit, the main hangar door, until the sun went down and it got cold, and then I went back inside.
Nice.
Hung out there for about an hour and a half and just puffed around a little bit, editing some videos and stuff. So, yeah, I was at the airport. That's something.
That is something. That counts.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Well, should we get into some news for this episode?
I think we should.
Let's do it.
All right. Take it away, whoever.
Let's kick it off in Detroit. I promised I wouldn't say. I promised I wouldn't say Detroit.
Fun times in Cleveland again. We're not Detroit.
Yes. All right. So, in Detroit, there is a new, what it's referring to as a first of its kind aviation headquarters there, where ground has been broken on a new helicopter air tour facility. Why is it considered the first of its kind? Well, it's the first in over 60 years that something like this has been developed. The facility will be based at the Coleman A. Young International Airport, and it'll be 12,000 square feet. In addition to helicopter tours, guests will be able to enjoy a bar, which is the perfect thing to do before flying, small appetizer plates, an outdoor patio, and host unforgettable events from wedding proposals to holiday parties in a one-of-a-kind aviation setting. They're calling it a merge of aviation, entertainment, and community under one roof. Now that construction has begun, they are on schedule to be open in late 2025, so that's pretty quick already.
That is pretty quick when they're just groundbreaking now.
Yeah.
Good for them. I hope it works out.
Way to go, Detroit.
Jeez.
Never again.
All right. Meandering over to Cleveland, because we're Ohio-centric today. Some Ohio lawmakers, 13 specifically, are pushing for NASA to relocate its headquarters from Washington, D.C. to Cleveland once its lease expires in 2028, which I didn't know that was a thing. I just figured everything had to be based in Washington, D.C. because I'm 5 years old and I don't know any better.
That's where the government is. It's in Washington,
That's
D.C.
right? That's what I'm saying. But 12 Republican and 1 Democrat lawmakers in Ohio kind of collaborated together on a letter, and what that was sent to Vice President J.D. Vance and the upcoming NASA leader. His name is Jared Isaacman. They essentially outlined kind of why Ohio is so great and, their rich aviation history, and really emphasize cost savings, which would be great for that particular area of our government for NASA, because the less money they can spend on things like renting air space and stuff is probably a good thing. So they can send people to space. Haha. So apparently this is happening all across the board with this particular administration. We're seeing a lot of expansion outside of Washington, D.C., where rent is a little bit cheaper and things can operate a little bit more efficiently. So that would be very interesting to see. Now, Ohio is probably a decent choice for this, especially because the NASA Glenn Research Center and the Lewis Field site are both at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. And they both offer lots of office space and redevelopment areas. So that also, it just seems like a good fit. So hopefully that gets seen, and maybe we'll see the new NASA headquarters in Ohio. Very exciting.
All right, so this story comes from both Oshkosh and Wausau, Wisconsin, where we are combining the annual EAA Air Race and EAA Air Venture. The Air Race this year is going to be a round-robin race, both starting and ending in the Wausau Downtown Airport. That's Alpha Uniform Whiskey. Did I say uniform? That is right. I get my flying and police letters.
I totally did that too. It's totally fine.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Trying. That's important.
So what does a round-robin race in Wausau have to do with Air Venture? Well, the race is going to be held on July 20th to kick off an Air Adventure weekend excitement, extravaganza, whatever they want to call it, but it's historically viewed as the unofficial kickoff for Air Venture. So that event is on the 20th and only a short hop away from Air Venture, which starts the 21st and goes through July 27th. So if you are going to the air races in Wausau, you'll just be a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Endeavour Bridge and the start of the Oshkosh arrival.
Oh boy,
what could go wrong?
We're less than 100 days until Oshkosh.
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Let's go!
Who's excited?
As a little bit of history about the Air Venture Cup race, it first took place in 1998, beginning in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, which of course is the birthplace of powered flight, and only had 10 aircraft. This year, they're expecting up to 80 aircraft to be involved in the 400 nautical mile round-robin trip. So very cool to see how it's grown.
All right, ski-daddling over to Iowa. There's a bill that's on the House floor right now that would further prohibit the ability of a drone, a remote piloted aircraft, to fly over farmland, though it needs final approval from the Senate before it can be sent to the governor. Excuse me. So this was actually amended recently, this particular, it's a Senate file. So that actually removes some language classifying a farmstead as 40 or more contiguous acres. This is important because of small farm, homesteads and stuff like that. So this bill is actually building off of another bill from last year that prohibited drones from flying over animal feeding areas and homesteads, and actually created a misdemeanor fine up to just over $2,500 if if a drone flew over with recording devices. It seems like any recording device of any kind. So this proposed legislation would prohibit the use of a drone without the landowner's permission, obviously, within 400 feet of animals or equipment and structures, including residences, barns, and manure storage, anything of that sort. So this is trying to, broaden security. Broaden security and broaden the scope of existing law, because there really isn't a whole lot of law surrounding drones. We right now have the 400-foot rule and stuff like that, but there really isn't a lot that governs these things. As people who are supporting this bill say livestock are afraid of drones, which I don't blame them. I don't like them either, and that it invades privacy, which is very fair. But also some people who oppose it say that it would be preempted by federal laws that already regulate airspace. But we'll see what happens. So basically, states are right now kind of allowed to regulate as they please, as long as they don't relate to anything regarding commercial carriers, or they don't interfere with other federal regulations. So we'll see what happens. But so far in the House, no lawmakers spoke in opposition to this bill. So it'll probably pass.
Interesting.
We'll and this concludes our news.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing the news, you two.
No problem.
Absolutely.
So with our news out of the way, Badger, are you ready to introduce our special guest for this episode?
I am. I'm really excited for this one. This episode, we have a very special guest. She is a Gold SEAL CFI, recently surpassed 1,500 hours. She recently got type rated. She's ATP and a very powerful force in the aviation social medias. She is an influencer, probably the only influencer who doesn't actually watch any other influencers, but that's all right. Welcome to the podcast, Maddie.
Hi, Maddie.
Hi. I'm already here.
You sure are. You sure are. Well, Our special guest is Maddie. We're going to talk all about her ATP and type rating process. Thought it would be a fun little episode to just riddle her with questions for the benefit of our listeners who might be interested in taking this route in their future.
I want the public to know I have had zero time to look over these questions. I have no idea what they're going to ask me, so you get it all raw and real. Whatever I say is whatever I say.
That's the best way to do it.
That's fine, because I've had zero time to look over them too. So,
and I wrote them. So, Maddie, we're going to do with you what we do with all guests. We're going to start this episode with the fast 5 questions.
I get fast 5.
You get fast 5 questions.
Wow. Okay.
All right. Question number 1. Who is your...
They're secret.
Yeah, they're not written on the thing.
I was just going to say
they're not in the show notes. They're in my head.
Wow.
Question number 1. Favorite aviation podcasting co-host? Not the real question. All right, question number 1.
No, I think that I'm curious to hear where this goes.
Now I'm going to think about it.
She's been thinking about it for years. She just won't admit it.
Oh, right, yeah, for sure.
Watch her list. She would list a co-host of another podcast if she listened to any. So
right.
That's so true.
Just to mess with us. All right. Real question number 1. Do you have a favorite instructional course for private pilot students?
Ooh, course?
Yeah. Or text, whether it be Jepson or Sporties or...
Hands down, and this is super, super biased, the Jeppesen Private Pilot Flight Discovery. I love those books. The Private Pilot and the Instrument Commercial one. They're fabulous. They're so, so good. We had Liz Cayley on the show, gosh, it's probably almost 2 years ago now. And she was fantastic. She's the one who writes all of those books. And she does a fantastic job, as always. So they're full of information. They're all geared towards the up-and-coming pilot of that particular rating, unlike the AFH and the PHAC, where you have to kind of dig through the stuff that you don't need for the stuff you need. It's all stuff you need, and a lot of good stuff, supplementary stuff along the way. So as far as me being a reader, I love to read. That is my favorite. Forever.
Okay. Forever. Not on a reading topic. Favorite aviation film character?
I'm going to say Maverick, because I can use Top Gun and from actual Maverick, because one... I get to talk about hazardous attitudes. But also, it's Tom Cruise. He might be a little strange, but watching him act is always a fun time.
Yeah.
And also airplanes. So, I'm just going to have to go with that.
Okay. Question number 3. Least favorite aircraft you have flown?
I didn't love the Arrow. Of all the ones I've flown, I haven't
Really?
flown a lot, like Cherokees and stuff like that. I didn't like the Arrow. It's super nose heavy.
Yeah.
And the performance just doesn't correlate. Like, it's not that much faster than, like a Cherokee. It's not that much faster. It's got a retractable gear and stuff. It's more complex. But, yeah, just because, I flew a 200 horsepower one, it just was not enough to keep up with all that weight. My fingers would, lose circulation doing steep turns because its nose was so freaking heavy. It was just not a pleasant airplane to fly.
That's fair. Question number 4. What is your dream aircraft to fly?
Ooh. Ridiculous dream or realistic dream?
You know what? Let's go realistic for this one.
I would love to fly a 747.
Okay.
Yes.
Someday.
That's an iconic aircraft, isn't it?
It is. And there's not a lot of them
Not a lot left.
And that makes me really, really sad. That's been my dream for a long time.
All right. Question number 5. Most inspirational person to you in aviation?
It's also so hard. I know these are thought-provoking questions.
That's the idea.
At the moment, for me, and I'm unabashed, especially lately, Tony Kern, Dr. Tony Kern, he is, I don't want to call him a motivational speaker because he's not. He does a lot of things in the professional aviation kind of, I'm trying to think of, CRM, that kind of thing. He's that person. He's that higher level operations type of person. So he's written a lot of books throughout the years. My favorite book almost of all time, is actually, I'm on the last few pages of it. It's redefining airmanship. Talks about things like situational awareness. What really is it? What is CRM? Those kinds of things. Super, super cool. He has great insight, and he's a fantastic writer. I follow him on LinkedIn, and he follows me, and he sometimes comments on my posts, which is really exciting.
Nice.
So, unabashed fangirl. But I really like his stuff, and I think his stuff has really helped me grow as a professional aviator.
Nice. I like that answer. Well, Maddie, thank you for playing along with our Fast 5 questions. I know that you probably didn't see this coming, but thanks for playing along.
It was a little strange, I'll admit, but hey, it was fun.
Uh-huh. Well, Badger, would you like to take it away into the meat and potatoes of this episode? That was very robotic. I don't like it.
Dang it. I have to have lunch. Meat and potatoes sounds amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Maddie, you already know we're here to talk about your experience getting your type rating and getting your ATP. Can you tell us about what each of those is for the listener that might not know, and what's the difference between the two of them?
Sure. So ATP is Airline Transport Pilot. So that's the rating that you need to go to either work for the airlines as a pilot, so either a first officer or as captain. This rating is also needed if you are a captain for a Part 135 operation that requires 2 pilots. So it's a pretty important rating. It's kind of like the last big one because you need about 1,500 hours depending on what your qualifications are. And of course, you need a bunch of cross-country time and night time and instrument time and blah, 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 blah. Lots of qualifications that go into this rating. So it's kind of the culmination of most people's experience. So a type rating, on the other hand, is something that, if you go into professional aviation and go into like larger things like jets, you will probably accumulate, and they're kind of like feathers in your cap. So a type rating is a course you go to for a specific airplane. So certain airplanes require type ratings based on weight, if they're a jet, and things. So there are different qualifications that you need. So to fly 737, you would need a 737 type rating. You go to school, you do ground school, learn about all the systems and the procedures and all that stuff. And then you go into the simulator, fly the simulator a bunch, check off all the qualifications, take a check ride, and voila, you have a type rating. So you are qualified in some form to fly that airplane. So again, these are for larger airplanes. If you're a private pilot, you can fly most, single engine piston airplanes. But, there's certain airplanes that you couldn't fly because they have a turbojet or they're above 12,500 pounds. So for those, you do need a type rating. So I got my type rating in the Beechjet, and I got the PIC type rating. So I actually could act as pilot in command if I had to. That's kind of how that works. You can get a second in command rating as well. So that's how that works, and you can accumulate multiple of them, but the ATP you only get 1 of. Well, you could get 2 or 4, I guess, if you add seaplanes. You could get a lot of them for different, never mind. Scratch that. ATP is based on, you can get multiple versions of it, just like you could for commercial or private, depending on the category. So, if it's a single engine land, multi-engine land, single engine sea, rotorcraft, etc. Those are all, but I got the multi-engine one. That's the only one I need right now. So we're good.
So with getting a multi-engine land type rating, does that automatically give you an ATP, or how does that work?
No, it does not. So that's a good question. It does not. So I was able to do them concurrently. That is not always how it is done. A lot of people do it that way, especially if you go to the airlines. At least this is how it used to be, a couple of years ago. You'd go in with your 1,500 hours, you were qualified, but you hadn't yet done everything. So you would have to take the ATP CTP course, which is that, I did that last year, if any of you guys remember that. Basically, it's a ground and simulator course, kind of similar to a type rating, except for it's very generic as far as 121 operations, jet airplane operations, those kinds of things. Very generic stuff. Just kind of preparing you for airline transport, essentially, because it's a different operations than you would flying your little Cessna or on the pattern. Totally different. So that's the FAA's attempt in kind of trying to bridge that. Now, you can just take the check ride. I could have just taken it in my school's Aztec. I could do that with a DPE. It would have been fine. But you can do a type rating concurrently with the ATP or vice versa. So a lot of people come in for the Beechjet and do their type rating and then have that ATP on as well. I actually have an initial client right now who is doing just that.
So what does that process look like for you as you prepare? Are there certain prerequisites you had to meet before you went for that ride?
Yep. So, I mean, ATP and type rating obviously have different prerequisites. The ATP is the big one, really. That's that 1,500 hours, unless you're restricted, which I technically was, but I ended up getting a different restriction because I have 1,500 hours. It's kind of complicated. Dive into the regs if you're really curious, but it's really not that big of a deal. But essentially, yes, you need a certain amount of cross-country instrument and night hours for that. And the most interesting to me is for ATP, it is the only one that requires you to be, quote, of good moral character, unquote. So say if the FAA, it is in the regs, which I think is very interesting. It seems to mean more like, have you ever had a felony or anything? But okay. I appreciate the slight morality of regulation, which I think is kind of interesting. Type rating, you just need the training for it. There's actually a couple different ways to get a type. A lot of people, or it used to be very, very common. Now it's less so with insurance, where you would just go up, you would get hired on, you'd get taught a few things by like the chief pilot or whatever, and you go up and do 3 takeoffs and landings in the airplane. Ta-da! You have what's called a 6155 SIC type. And because you've had a landing in it, you can get that type. However, that is a little bit different than the SIC type that you would get doing a course like at Flight Safety or CAE or somewhere like that. And that's, you do need a landing in that. Once you get that, you get it on your certificate. It's beautiful. We love it. You pass the test to the PIC standards because the Checkrides are slightly different. The SIC, there's fewer things that you have to perform. As far as preparation, I had about 3 weeks to kind of wrap my head around the fact that I was doing this, and about 2 weeks to know that I was going to be also doing my ATP, which was horrifying. My boss said, yeah, it's like the same check ride. I said, okay, but have you seen the ACS for it? So the standards, there are a few things in the check ride that are a little bit different. You have to talk about weather, 121 regs, human factors, which isn't a huge deal, and aircraft systems in a little bit more depth. So like jet engines and how they work and stuff like that. So mainly if you do a type rating at a school, that a Part 142 school, which is what Flight Safety and CAE are, you mainly have your testing and everything around the airplane. So, you know, the systems of this particular airplane, just kind of like an average check ride, where you're not usually asked, you know, if you have a carbureted airplane, you're not usually asked really in depth about fuel injection systems. You just kind of need to know about them, that they exist. You don't need to know them and all their intricacies because it's not the airplane you brought to the check ride. So it's kind of like that. A lot of that stuff is formed around the check ride, but a lot of the stuff is kind of piled in. So as far as my preparation, I was kind of running like a chicken with my head cut off because I wasn't really sure how to prepare. It was the first rating, aside from CFI, that I felt really lost because there is stuff out there, but really because, you know, if you go for your type and things like that, there are a lot of specific guidances like that. So there isn't like, if you're going for your ATP in the beach jet, like here's how you should prepare. Like you kind of just got to figure it out, which at this level is kind of a rite of passage in my opinion, a little bit. Like I wish there was a little bit more, you know, in-depth stuff. And there's the oral exam guide that I looked through and stuff like that. Actually, my examiner had a copy as well because he was the only reason I did it was because my examiner was being overseen by the FAA. So I had the FAA in the room too and in the simulator. It was pretty crazy.
Lucky.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was so much fun. It was relatively uneventful. Yes, I told him about the podcast. I looked into a lot of the resources that are given in the ACS, which are different than some of the ones you guys might be used to. And it was different than I was used to. So for instance, the aerodynamics for naval aviators. Ever heard of that one? That one's fun. Little over my head, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. And actually the ATP test takes a lot of those questions, or a lot of their questions from that particular text. Maintenance manuals, that was pretty crazy, having to look at those. I got really in depth into the POM and the AFM for my airplane, so the airplane flying manual, and then the pilot's operating manual. It's just a POH. So those manuals were kind of like my guidebook because I didn't have anything else. Basically, the big things for those are limitations, memory items, and just a general thorough knowledge of systems. So I was kind of on my own, and that's okay. I think I learned a lot from it.
Well, it sounds like a lot of it, though, is pretty familiar as far as like the format of the check ride, though, which I think has to be sort of calming and reassuring, right? Like sounds like there's an oral portion, which everyone as early as a private pilot knows. And then there's a flying portion. So is that right? And if so, how long was the oral? And how long was the sim? Because private pilot, you're looking at 2 hours of an oral, hour and a half of flying, maybe. Is it that quick?
Yeah, 2 and 2.
Okay.
Yeah, some of the more difficult ratings, you have more, and CFI, that's a long one. But I think it actually went a lot faster than I thought it would. So the thing I was most afraid of was the oral, because I've actually never seen one for an ATP or anything. I've never seen an oral because they keep us, the SICs out of those. But I've seen a pictorial pre-flight. And I've also seen the sim eval because I do those all the time. So I was not at all worried about the flying. As long as I kept ahead of the airplane and, I knew I was okay. But the oral, I was a little bit worried about because, again, I had no idea what to expect. Thankfully, a lot of the instructors use the actual checklist and kind of extrapolate on those, going through systems, through weather and things like that, using the checklist as a guide, which is pretty cool. So I got really into the checklist. What do we have? What systems are involved in each check and each, abnormal or emergency section, that kind of thing, which easier said than done. There's a lot of stuff. But yeah, so I talked to some of the other examiners in the building to see kind of how they conducted their check rides, and they seem to all be kind of on the same page as to what they do. Not specific questions, but specific formats. So I kind of had a little bit of a guide there. But other than that, I was totally on my own there, which was pretty crazy. It was as unprepared as I've ever felt for an oral. But thankfully, it was actually way easier than I thought it would be. There was a lot of, I maybe got tripped up once or twice, but overall I felt pretty prepared. I know the beach jet in certain ways, but in other ways, like I was really not aware of a lot of things just because I don't use them on a daily basis, like in depth, like en route performance. I've never once calculated en route performance because I am never en route. I am always either in the takeoff or landing phase when we're in the sim. So it's not something I've ever looked at. Turnaround, I don't know. I know we have to do the calculations if we use the brakes. Like that's all I knew. So I had to dig into those some more, like for me, obscure stuff. But for a normal, pilot who flies this airplane, probably wouldn't be a big deal. Something they do every day. So that was interesting. But yeah, so the oral was maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. But it was actually pretty short. We had to do a lot of paperwork and stuff like that with IACRA and everything.
Gotcha.
So yeah, that took up a big chunk of time. And then we also had to do the pictorial pre-flight, which is a legal requirement because we can't actually pre-flight the sim. So it's literally just clicking through photos and of the aircraft and checking everything on the checklist as if you were doing a real pre-flight, except for you're going through pictures on a computer. It's kind of funny. Not too complicated. Just knowing what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, this is clear. Yep, this valve is in the right position. This isn't cracked. These aren't missing. That kind of thing. Not a super huge deal. I've never seen the airplane in real life. Like I've never touched one. So that was, it's just, but I know the pictures.
I don't think that's too uncommon for type ratings from what I'm learning.
That's true. Yeah, that is actually, you're right. A lot of people, I know in my initial class, there were, I think, 8 that were getting their PIC initial types. And I think only a couple of them had ever flown a jet before.
Okay.
So it was pretty new to all of them. And they had to do it. So I figured if they can do it, I think I can do it too. So I did.
All right. During the oral portion of the check ride, was there anything that they had hit a little bit more heavily, or was it basically what you expected?
It was basically what I expected, just kind of an overview, just because we were kind of crunched for time. Just an overview on everything. Systems, regs, MEL, mostly systems.
Okay.
Just because that's, the majority of the airplane. Some procedures and here and there. but mostly it was kind of what I expected or what I was hoping for. I've heard different stories. Some examiners, I know my boss mentioned that one of his recurrents, so not his initial ATP, one of his recurrents, he walked in and there were just a slew of numbers on the whiteboard. And the instructor said, okay, here's your seat. You're going to tell me what 70% of these numbers mean. And if you can do that, you pass. Which is nuts. I think I could do that with the beach jet. I was like, what kind of numbers do I remember? But that's one way. I've heard just varying ways of the check ride being done. Yes, going through certain checklists line by line, which system is this? If you see this indication, what is actually happening? What does this light mean it's working, or does it mean there's electricity going to it? Does it mean a valve's moving? Stuff like that. I was expecting nitty gritty, but it was, we hopped around different systems and kind of talked about how some of them related, and things like that. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it could have been worse, I suppose.
Oh, good. That's good.
So then getting into the sim, as I mentioned, I started teaching myself commercial maneuvers. So did you have to get in the sim and do lazy eights or chandelles or eights on pylons?
Oh, come on.
I wish. That'd be fun. No.
What did they have you doing?
So the ATP check ride, if you look at the ACS, it's actually really straightforward. There's not a whole lot that you actually do. It's mostly approaches, because what they're looking for isn't like mastery of the aircraft like you do in commercial, like doing nitpicky things to show that you can do it, to show, the things that we do, or to show that we're safe, we can recover from stalls or unusual attitudes or abnormal flight conditions like engine failure or a broken component. And that's pretty much it. So it's really kind of boring in a way, especially having seen it so many times. But we ran through it. Like, I had 3 days of sims, and we ran through it. It was not a huge deal. I knew it was coming. So basically, it followed the normal check ride profile. We did all the starts, cold, dark cockpit. We go through it. I was with actually the gentleman who did my ground school, both for this, my previous recurrent, and my initial, as my co-pilot. We fought sometimes. It was kind of fun. But he's great. His name is Kyle. He's fantastic. He and I would go through the checklists and make sure, start it up. Start malfunctions are really common. So a hot or hung start, or a starter fails to disengage. Those are the big ones for the beach jet. So I got a couple of those. Then we had engine starts. Just like a normal flight, almost getting, the weather, taxi clearance, except for the guy who's giving it to you is sitting right behind you talking to a speaker, which is a little bit disconcerting. But you get used to it after a while. So, you taxi out, you do your checks. Sometimes there's an issue with one of the checks, like a valve doesn't open, or a TR doesn't deploy, or, things happen. So you identify them and they get fixed, and then you continue on. Then the takeoff is, just a normal takeoff, usually pretty low visibility. You take off, at least in the beach jet, you take off and you do a departure. So a departure procedure. So usually we're at Memphis for this. So we do one of the Memphis departures, and then we go up and do our air work. So things, steep turns, stalls, some of the stalls, and then unusual attitudes are there. That's it for the air work. Okay. So we're used to, all our check rides pretty much being air work except for instruments. So it's kind of like an instrument check ride in a way. But you do actually do steep turns and, stalls and the unusual attitudes. Unusual attitudes are interesting. Again, with a jet, everything's a little bit different, but it's an airplane, so not too bad. But we do all 3 stalls. So clean, landing stall, and then a departure stall, so a turning stall with flaps. So those get done usually in the environment where they're supposed to be done, because that's how the check ride is supposed to be done. So mine was like that. I had 1 clean stall in cruise, and then we came back, did an arrival in, and then did our first approach. The first approach was to a missed approach, and I had an engine failure on that one. So as soon as we went missed, gear comes, flaps go to 10, gear comes up, engine fails. Darn, who could have seen that coming? So I tootled around on a failed engine for a bit. We got it shut down. I think we didn't restart that one. That one was catastrophic. So Then we came back around for a single engine ILS to land. I believe I landed out of that one. I may have gone around, actually. No, I landed off of that one. Then we usually get repositioned, or we turn around at the end and then take off again. So we call it lazy eights over Memphis. It's basically approach, 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 approach. So you go do an approach, you do the miss, you do the hold, and then you come back for vectors for another ILS, and then you come back in, and then you do, it's like that over and over and over again. I had to do 5 approaches, I think.
Wow.
So I did 2 ILSs, I did an LNAV only, a localizer, and then another RNAV for my no flap landing. So that's an interesting one. So no flap landings are actually tested. Where, instead of a full hydraulic failure, it's actually, we just do the, no flap landing, which is actually a requirement for the HP, which I thought was interesting. And it's really no big deal. You just set a slower, lower power setting, higher angle of attack. It's kind of annoying to do in the beach jet because we're already sitting really nose high, but it's fine, whatever. So I just did an RNAV, and it was no big deal. And then everybody's favorite, the circle to land. So we did localizer, circle to land, which I'm just going to say it. My circle to land was flawless. Flawless.
You get to brag about that.
Yeah.
I don't brag about much. I'm going to brag about that. It was so perfect. I'm like, yes, David Anderson would be so proud. David Anderson is one of the shit instructors. And he has like a whole formula. Like, you can mathematically determine the radius that you need to land the perfect circle to land. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So that was really fun. Yeah. Halfway through the check ride, the examiner was just like, I'm bored. I'm like, I could make it not boring.
Oh no, that's not a good thing for them to say.
No, it was just a joke. My examiner was my co-pilot for my initial when I first started.
Okay.
So that was pretty cool. It was kind of a cool, like, full circle moment. It was cute. So yeah, it was, I think I performed my very best that day, which doesn't usually happen, but I don't know. I felt pretty chill about it because I mean, I've seen him. The only thing that he got me on was he failed my primary flight display.
Okay.
Just before the final approach fix. Jerk move. Thanks, John. You know what you did if you're listeting. Yeah, so basically, all of a sudden, my screen in front of me just went blank. I'm like, really?
Aww.
And I didn't, I don't even, it's just, I pressed reversionary mode and put it on the MFD, the multifunction display. But I was like,
okay.
We didn't practice that during training, but it's fine. Like, I know what to do. I'm just mad about it. And I was also single engine for that one. So he really screwed me.
Yeah.
And it was not even, I don't even think that one was an ILS. I think that one was non-precision. And I also think I hand flew it.
Oh, funny.
So I'm like, nice.
But you did it. You did
I
it.
did it. He made it hard. And he didn't, he could have made it way worse, but I think he wanted me to pass, I hope. Everything was to standards. I landed a little long on one of my landings. I was mainly afraid of the landings, really, because I don't do a lot of them. Like, I can fly in the flight director, but when it comes to landing the thing, it's a little bit funky, and I fly Cessna so much that there's a negative transfer there. But
okay.
I ended up landing. I landed, all of mine were at least stable. They were where they were supposed to be. Not perfect, but that's okay. I'm okay with that.
So I have a question for you about, like, just how the sim part works. So I assume you have a sim partner with this, right? Or are you doing it by yourself? Okay.
No, God, no. So this is a crewed airplane. So an airplane that requires a 2-person crew or 3-person crew or whatever must be done with that amount of crew. So my co-pilot was Kyle, who was the ground instructor. So he sometimes he pinch hits and does the co-piloting stuff. So he was my co-pilot, which was very exciting. He's fun. We had a good time. I did yell at him during an ILS. Not completely, not out of malice. We were just fighting about, I don't remember what it was. We were just jabbering about something, total stereo cockpit, but he did something like, Kyle! So it was all in good fun. So yes, a crew is necessary for a crew airplane. So Kyle was there the whole time. We did our procedures. Now, there are a couple of things that can only be done single pilot. So steep turns are one of them.
Okay.
The rule I was taught was during steep turns, I was to become a potted plant in the right seat because I was not allowed to touch anything. It's a single pilot maneuver now per the FAA. So steep turns, you have to adjust your power and adjust your pitch and everything on your own. You don't have correction calls like 100 feet low or 10 knot or airspeed or whatever.
Okay.
Like I didn't get any of those prompts. So those you have to do alone. Also, generally things like emergency descents, which I didn't have on the check ride, is single pilot too, where, you have to take the autopilot off, pull the speed brakes and stuff yourself is generally how that works. But otherwise, yeah, you need somebody to run the checklist and things. For airplanes that do not or have a single pilot option, you do have to do everything.
Okay.
So like the King Air, you can get a dual type where you need to have somebody there with you, or you can get a single pilot type where you can fly then single pilot. Same with the citations.
So I'd say it's probably safe to assume that crew resource management is definitely part of this ride.
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Cool.
Yeah, I learned a lot doing that. It was definitely weird being on the other side.
Okay.
Having to give the commands and giving the orders from the prompts, positive rate, gear up. Usually I'm saying positive rate,
Yeah.
and then I'm just putting the gear up when told, and I having to call for that was, a little bit weird. Or, asking to set up the boxes or, program the approach or brief the approach or different things like that. Like it was definitely a stretch and exercise, but it was very enjoyable.
Well, that's good though.
Is the sim partner also going for their type? And is it possible that like if they bust their ride, it ruins yours, or how would that work?
So that's a great question. Not always. So Kyle was pinch hitting, like he was just at a point, kind of like what I do. So not always. If you go with somebody else, they're generally also going for their check ride. And honestly, I am not sure. Usually it's the person who's flying who is being evaluated. So if it's, say it's your check ride and you're flying, it's your like your PIC, you're doing all that stuff. From what I understand, if somebody else screws something up for you really royally, then as long as you try to get it back, like how you would in real life,
True.
From what I understand, that's can be considered a pass. But honestly, that is a great question that I don't actually know. I've yet to hear of somebody not passing because their sim partner screwed something up so royally that they, they busted. Like I haven't heard that. Then again, it could have happened. I'm not sure. So I can't speak to that actually.
That's fair. What is one thing that you wish you knew before your check ride? Is there anything that like kind of snuck up on you?
Specifically, I don't think. I would have liked more time. I think everybody kind of says that, just to be a little bit more comfortable with the information. Like there's always more to learn. Of course, there's always more to learn. There's so much to know, especially about this airplane. There's a lot of stuff with this airplane. Lots of little nitpicky stuff. A lot of stuff it doesn't give you, but you need to know about. It's pretty tough. But I think just relaxing a little bit more, because I definitely stress myself out. I try not to. I'm trying to grow in that area of not stressing myself out. And I didn't stress myself out to the point where I was at max capacity. I couldn't perform, so that's good. But I think I definitely could have used my time a little bit more wisely, I think, prior to the check ride. So now I know how it goes. So, I probably the future ones won't be as bad, but
Sure.
It's hard to say.
If any of our listeners are thinking or preparing for an ATP CTP ride or getting a type rating, what advice do you have for them as they get started?
Know your limitations, know your memory items, know your goofy little systems. Those are going to be, especially the first two, those are the most important for any airplane. As far as the ATP ride, I can't speak to like a generic one necessarily, again, because mine was so specialized, but know your stuff. And that's like every check ride. But ATP is at a level that is a little bit different. It's a lot higher of a level than, even CFI, I think. It is not as hard of a check ride. Most people will say it's the easiest check ride, but it is also very demanding. There's a lot of stuff you need to know. If you look at the ACS for the ground stuff, it's really, really a lot. And then the tolerances are pretty tight. For landing, it's not actually as bad. It's actually, you get a lot more room. It's not 200 feet. It's like 2,000. But it's assuming you're flying a jet that's going 110 to 140 knots instead of 40 or whatever.
Right.
So, the tolerances are a little bit different, but things like steep turns and stuff are held to a little bit of a higher standard. So,
Sure.
just kind of knowing, being precise. I think the biggest thing is, especially if it's a crewed airplane, is crew resource management. Know as much as you can about that, keeping your situational awareness, and especially if you're going as PIC, being really willing to use your co-pilot, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to make you work. I'm like, that's literally why I'm here. Like, please give me tasks, otherwise I'm going to fall asleep over here.
Right.
Yeah.
So not being afraid to use your co-pilot, but also being willing to step in if your co-pilot is completely overwhelmed with tasks, keeping up that dialogue, because talking is actually super, super important, and keeping everybody's situational awareness up. Because if somebody hears something wrong, there can be a quick, oh, hey, well, what about this? Didn't we discuss that we were going to do this? Or I thought you wanted this mode. Why this mode? There can be that conversation. So things can go a lot more smoothly and a lot safer. And things can be issues can be detected way farther in advance. I think that's the big thing with the big focus with ATP, in my opinion. Now, single crew airplanes, it's a little bit different. Obviously, it's more on you, but I think a lot of those professional aspects are still remain. Single pilot resource management, making sure your radios are, nice and professional, standard, making sure that you fly the airplane smoothly, and that not only are you just considering the airplane and its abilities, but also the passengers, because that's more than likely what you're going to be flying. You could be doing cargo, but still, the operators want their airplanes flown nicely. And, you have your tolerances that you want to keep flying professionally, flying with standards, stabilized approaches, those kinds of things. So know your airplane, know those procedures, and stick to them really, really well, because you can't be cowboy on this check ride, right. On these check rides. You can't just be a cowboy, especially with transport category aircraft. You just can't do that. So, just being mindful of those things and going in with PIC confidence.
I like it. I think we've all heard about the dreaded V1 cuts. What can you tell us about that? How fun is that?
I don't think they're that bad.
Okay.
Then again, the Beechjet is a pretty mild airplane. It's kind of a bear to fly, but it's really not that bad. A V1 cut is the kind of slang term that we use in the industry to talk about basically the most adverse time that you could possibly lose an engine.
Okay.
So, with, obviously a multi-engine airplane. So in jet operations and larger aircraft operations, we have different speeds. So in your guys' planes, you have your rotation speed, right? You have, 60 knots or whatever. It's just when you rotate, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Before then, you can abort, if you get a flat tire or there's a deer on the runway or something, you can abort that takeoff, after which, you're in a single engine, so you're gliding back down in some form.
Uh-huh.
But in a large transport category aircraft, that actually changes, because there are certain regulations that require certain speeds to be able to be met. So a transport category aircraft must be able to climb if it loses one engine. That is a requirement. So that means you are going, whether you like it or not, after a certain speed. So there's V1, VR, and V2. So V1 is takeoff decision speed. That essentially is the speed at which you actually take your hand off the throttle and commit to the takeoff. So before then, you can abort for certain things. There's, some discussion on high or low speed regimes. What do you actually abort for during certain speeds? But generally, like, if you have an engine failure before that point, you're aborting.
Okay.
Because why bring anything air if you don't have to?
Mm-hmm.
After that, though, you're too fast. The one won't be able to stop in time. Two, you could actually overrun the air. You could overrun the airport, the runway.
Oh, you
could also cause fires with the brakes.
Don't want that.
Or worse, you could cause damage to the aircraft. You could also, flip it, roll it, that kind of thing. You don't want to, unless is your last choice. The airplane will not fly. You can't abort after that speed. You're taking it in the air. Whatever you can take, whatever it is, you can take it in the air and fix it later. It's actually safer that way. High speed aborts are actually very, very dangerous. So the VRs rotate just like you guys are used to.
Sure.
So VRs rotate. That's when you rotate, you bring the nose up, all that. And then V2 is takeoff safety speed. So if you do lose an engine, that's the speed you fly at. So essentially, a V1 cut is an engine failure right after V1. The V1 is called, the engine fails, and you have to deal with it from then on. So basically, it's kind of like dealing with it in multi-engine training, except for you're continuing the takeoff, and that's what you do for the next 10 minutes. So, you take off, basically keeping directional control, and usually airplanes have profiles. So ours is climbing up, get the gear up and everything, climb up to 400 feet, and we accelerate. So we kind of stay level for a little bit, speed up, get the flaps up, and speed up to 140 knots, which is our kind of climb speed, single engine. And we climb up at that speed until about 1,500 feet, and then we can start running checklists and everything because it's at a safe altitude. So that's a V1 cut. Usually people freak out about them because they are high stress and they are very demanding.
Sure.
If you have an airplane with very big engines, that can be very, very gnarly. But altogether, I don't think, especially in the beach, I don't think they're that bad. You just have to pay attention and don't use your rudder. Because people want to use their airlines. No, just use the rudder. Just use the rudder. Yeah, I think, they're interesting. But that's what a V1 cut is.
So if any examiners are listening, the next time Maddie does a check ride, do a V1 cut at an airport that requires a single engine departure procedure so that you're not on.
No! No! Disgusting. I hate that you know about that. Oh. If for all of our listeners who don't know about single engine departure procedures, there are some airports like Aspen and Rifle, or Aspen at least, certain like performance apps will actually have their own procedures, and they're awful. The one for Aspen makes me want to rip my hair out. It's terrible. I have to load in like 20 latitude, longitude coordinates into the FMS. Yes, it's terrible. You have to have split boxes, so each person has their own, and it's all visual, except for when you're single engine and climbing at 140 knots. You can't see in front of you. So visual is a suggestion as to not hit the mountains. It's terrible. Do not recommend. Thumbs down. Terrible. I hate them.
Oh, funny. Well, I want to say a huge thank you to our super special secret guest, Maddie, for joining us on this episode of the Flying Midwest podcast.
Thanks. I was already going to be here to begin with, so I'm happy to contribute.
Badger, did you learn anything?
I was disappointed to learn that you do not do chandelles and eights on pylons.
I know. It's disappointing, right?
Steep turns are exciting. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for our listeners, but I wonder how many listeners and how many passengers of aircraft that require type ratings realize that they might be flying in the back of a plane where it's the pilot's first time actually landing the plane.
It happens.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anybody coming out of IO or out of initial training, you're getting there the first time. Thankfully, usually they are placed with training captains who have lots of experience.
Yep.
That's generally how things go, especially like airlines and stuff.
I just
you never know when it's somebody's first day.
My personality would be I land and everybody is deplaning and I go and every single person that's getting off, that was my first landing. What'd you think? That was my first one. How was my first landing ever?
I think the passengers absolutely pee themselves in fear.
I think you get some looks.
Probably. I get some
probably from your captain too.
Delta again.
Funny. Well, thanks again, Maddie, for sharing your experience. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anything to help further the knowledge of the general public. Very exciting. So if you have any questions or comments about this episode, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to connect to answer your questions. Follow me on LinkedIn. No, I'm just kidding. Follow me on LinkedIn. I need more connections, apparently. But make sure to follow the podcast if you don't already. Comment. Love it. Like it. I hope you liked it. I had a fun time.
And remember, for future live episodes, join us over on Patreon or Discord. If you send us an email at flyingmidwestpodcast@gmail.com, we'll send you a link for the Discord. There are 2 of you out there that I still have to get to. I know, I'm really sorry. I'll send you the link as soon as we're done recording. And then as far as Patreon, we have a new Patreon supporter I want to talk about.
We do.
We sure do.
Nice.
Yay.
We would like to welcome Yancey Burchett at the monitoring CTAF level on Patreon.
Nice.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome.
So if you'd like to support us financially or just join in the fun on Patreon, there's some exclusive content we put there. I'm dropping early releases for my videos and stuff on YouTube there. So between that and our future live episodes, you'll get exclusive links to that by joining Patreon or Discord. We'll put links for all of that in the show notes.
Make sure you are subscribed or following us on your favorite podcast player. If you've already done it on yours, steal your friend's phone and
Yes.
like and follow and subscribe on theirs. And of course, we are looking for reviews still. 5-star ratings mean you can write whatever you want in the review. And as long as it's PG-ish, we'll even read it on the show.
We sure will.
Well, it's been fun.
It has.
Until next time.
See ya.
See ya!
See ya.
Lightspeed 536, contact Minneapolis Center 132.35 today.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Flying Midwest podcast. Until next time, podcast service terminated, squawk VFR, frequency change approved. Good day.
Too sexy for my coffee.
Oh my God! I just hit record too.
Oh, you have good timing.
Did you hit it early enough to get the context behind it at least?
No, I didn't.
Doesn't need context. It's funnier without it.
Fine.
Two
Saxophone,
saxophones.
mug.
2 saxophones on my mug. You know what? I always wanted to get rid of this mug. Now I think I have to keep it just so
You
I can
do.
Do. I'll just be sick that day. That look, I know you give your kids that look all the time when they say dumb things. I know that.
Probably. Yeah.
All right,
You know that
that's
look then.
gone.
All right.
I do.
Well, you just got it.
I get that frequently from my parents and my sister, and from a lot of you.
Jeez.
Get with the times, Detroit. Detroit.
Detroit. Let's not make it fancy here. We all know what Detroit is. Sorry. That's mean. I did say that I really hope that it does do good things for Detroit, because they've been in a slump for a long time.
They could use any help they can get.
I just completely missed my mouth.
You have a drinking problem?
For coffee? Yes, very much so. I'm in the, what's the hazardous attitude where you just don't care? Not despondent,
care?
but yeah. Not despondent or whatever, or
Are you
resignation.
for resignation? Or you don't think you
Yeah,
can
but
do
it's not
anything
really
about it?
resignation.
Invulnerability?
So resignation is you can't do anything about it. I'm more,
Right.
I don't want to do anything about it. Just tell me what to say.
I think that's the little known 6th hazardous attitude, also known as being frickin' lazy.
Despondent.
Despondent.
I'm totally not watching a soccer game on the other screen over here, by the way.
I'm shocked.
So if you see funny faces, they did or did not do something. Oh, that was a horrible shot. Sorry. That should have been a goal. Horrible.
They're not. It's not bad. It's just math.
No, it is bad because it's math.
Valid.
I hate math.
Let's see. When's it gonna open?